You are listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. We want to help demystify marketing to reduce risk, drive more and better opportunities, and grow your business. Are you ready to master marketing?
All right, I'm Pete Monfre. Let's get into the B2B Marketing Mindset. It is episode 110, if you can believe that. I am so fired up for today's program because we have a true growth expert who has built at least 2 direct-to-consumer companies, maybe 3, from the ground up to multi-million-dollar enterprises. And I've worked with him on one of those incredible success stories. We played a small part in helping take one of his companies from 1 employee, brick and mortar, to the largest online e-tailer of costumes, 175 million in revenue. So this guy's the real deal, and what he's accomplished is no small feat. And so we're going to share some lessons he's learned along the way. He's going to teach me some things, his views on marketing and branding, pros and cons of bringing your agency in-house or working with external agencies, give some advice to you marketers and agencies out there, and maybe some surprise lessons that he's learned along the way. So, you know, if you're seeing this video live, do us a big favor and hit like, comment, or share on LinkedIn, because that tells the algorithm to spread us farther and wider. So it also helps my self-esteem. So you'll want to do that. And real quickly here, B2B Marketing Mindset is brought to you by the Agency Founders Network, an online platform for marketing services companies. We're dedicated to helping 1,000 agencies break the chains of being just another vendor and help them become more strategic. So stop being a commodity, become a trusted advisor. You can join for free at AgencyFoundersNetwork.com. And so let's welcome our guest here, Mr. Joel M. Getz. Good to see you, my friend. President and CEO of Wantable.com, former CEO of BuySeasons.com. What an exciting process that was back in the day.
Yes.
And so it's great to have you on the program finally.
Likewise, great to be here, Pete. Yeah, we were chatting before the show, all the things we had done and how our paths have crossed over the years. It's been quite a ride, my friend, quite a ride. So pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, and you're in Milwaukee, and that's where we used to be. And we had our offices down there on Water Street, and we were kind of a hot property there for about a decade. And it was a different time, I think, and you know, this podcast has really started to tilt towards, you know, helping agencies and sharing, you know, what we learned from facing all the same problems that they did, that everybody faces, I think, in the first like 1 to 5 years, you know, where you realize you don't have any operational systems and, you know, all that sort of thing. But thank you for that, working with us back then, and you helped us, you know, get to the 7-figure mark with our business.
Right.
Not just you, but you know, lots of clients, and it was
Right.
just a great experience, and really we learned a lot from our clients, and you including. So that's why I was excited to have you on. But tell us a little bit about you and Wantable.com.
For sure, for sure. Well, again, thank you so much for having me, Pete. Pleasure to be here today. A little bit on the history, because I think we'll dive into some of my experience as we get through your podcast. So you know me, and we crossed paths when I was running a company called Buy Seasons, which was a very small, you know, less than probably 5, 6, 7 people when we crossed paths. And that was my second company at the time. And it was a Halloween retailer.
That's right.
And our largest brand was buycostumes.com. So we sold Halloween costumes on the internet. And you know, your audience needs to understand that this is going back now a couple of decades. So selling on the internet was still this new thing. And then selling costumes, you know, I remember people telling me at the time, no one's ever going to put your credit card online. And of course, we all laugh when we hear that today in the new world that we live in. So it was a heck of a ride there, grew that company from just a couple million to, when I departed, 175 million. Sold it to a public company along the way, and then did some M&A, mergers and acquisitions, for them for the next 4 years, and then rode off into the sunset in 2010, 2011. That's when I then took some time and started what would be Wantable today, which is we're a retailer of women's apparel, but the business model that we used was very novel back then and is now getting relatively widely adopted, which is personal styling. That's when a customer comes to the retailer and says, I want help with my wardrobe. I'm going to answer some questions. I'm going to have a conversation with a stylist. And then we, as the retailer and our expertise, will pick things for that customer, put them in a box, send it to them at home without them having paid for it. Customer will try it on and get that experience that's kind of lost in online retail today, which is the ability to try things on that were picked out for you by an expert stylist. And then you decide to keep what you want and send back the rest, and the process begins over again. We have about 400, 450 employees. We're just going into our busy season, which is fall, as back to school kind of closes and our customers, decide to go shopping for their fall wardrobe before kind of the holiday season hits us. So again, I've been a retailer my whole life. I've worked with agencies, worked with you in the past, have learned a ton, and I'm super excited to kind of chat with you to relive those times and maybe share a few nuggets with your audience.
Well, boy, have things changed. You and I have been doing this long enough to see this entire marketing industry turn itself inside out. And I remember those days because, even our attitude at the agency was this internet thing. I don't know. Let's wait a little bit and see how it's going to work out. It was very early on, and in order to create an online store back then, it was really a technical feat. And so I'm really proud of our team back then, that we really had some extraordinary people on the technical end and on the creative end. But total subscription box market size reached $32 billion in 2023, according to iMark Group. It's expected to be $105 billion by 2032. I think that's low, actually, just based on how the adoption rate and growth rates are going in the industry. But and I love that you have stylists. It's not just, you punch in your preferences and an algorithm takes over. And I keep seeing you compared to, is it Stitch?
Stitch Fix, yes.
The Stitch Fix, right. So, that's a good thing. They can kind of compare you to the,
Sure.
to the biggest one, and you also are like there's a list of the top players, and Wantable number 5 on the list.
Yeah, we would argue that we're number 2, but that's okay. Don't tell anybody.
Well, that's just
But
one list, and who knows who
yeah,
those
yeah,
people
no,
are.
no.
I mean, but at least that you're in that. You're in the market. I mean, you've made
We
a
are.
name for this, and that is no small feat by itself, because it's become more competitive, right? I mean, this business
Absolutely.
model.
Yeah, very competitive. And the reason I joke and say that we call ourselves number 2 is your audience may recall the old we're for Avis commercial, which is we try harder because we're number 2, right?
That's right.
And that kind of mantra is something that we have here again at our team. But look, it's a large market. There's plenty to go around, and our goal is just to kind of focus on growing our business, taking care of our customers. And as you know, whether you're an agency or a retailer or the corner store, it's all about taking care of the customers one at a time and addressing their needs, whatever they happen to be in that moment.
Absolutely. And I wanted to tell viewers, and by the way, we have 30,000 subscribers, so hopefully, 3 of them are listening. But Bill Gates is known as a serial entrepreneur. But if you think about it, and Malcolm Gladwell called him a oneer. Okay, not a serial entrepreneur. He did one thing, and it worked really well, but he still only did one thing.
Yeah.
And so to have 3 success stories on the level that you've had, it's extraordinary. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your skirt, but
Thank you.
it's really something. But I also know it's a redonkulous amount of work, and adaptation, and constantly changing. And so I think that where I want to start is, and you've like us. I mean, I have 3 companies now, but I don't think we've ever strived to be as large. But starting at zero, right? And so, is there any advice that you would have for a startup that
Sure.
maybe is starting off bootstrapping? I think a lot of people look at this and say, how on earth do you get to 100 million, 150 million? Is there any insight there?
For sure. Well, I think you teed it up and said starting at zero. So, there's definitely advice that you could give at different points. There's the napkin, you're still kind of sketching out what the plan is, and you're going from zero to, your first sale. So I'll maybe kind of start there because to me, unless you would prefer me to start kind of
No,
further
fair
on.
enough.
Yeah. So again, this will be in the context of what I do, which is more direct to consumer, but I think it's pretty applicable for anybody listening in their business. So what I've found successful myself at each one of these businesses is, again, at zero, you have to be willing to do everything almost all at once. And that's really not sustainable as you grow. So on day one, you're taking out the garbage, you're writing up the business plans, you're, in my case, bidding on ads on Meta or Google, you're designing the logos and all those things. Later, when it comes along, you can kind of reboot some of that. And that was kind of when you and I met, was taking what I had started and, kind of leveraging the expertise of others. So day one is no one is going to know your business better than you do. No one's going to have the vision that you have because if they did, they would have already done it. And just working very hard and understanding that you need to do the best that you can. And in my case, avoid perfection on the first draft. Get it in front of the customer. They might call that minimum viable product today. Get it in front of the customer as soon as you can, listen to them, and then kind of change and I hate the term, but pivot and make adjustments until you get maybe where we are now, which is what I call a middle-aged startup, where you don't want to be so cavalier with every single decision because you now have a real foundation of customers and a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a message for all the bootstrappers out there. Bootstrapping's supposed to be a temporary condition. It's not supposed to go on forever, but
Right.
sometimes it's about the only way that you're going to be able to do it. And but you have to be able to, I think, make that transition to where, things like systems and processes start to
Yeah.
become important because that way you can have a team and they can execute the way that you envision and hopefully stay close to your vision. I don't think it makes any less work for the founder though,
No,
but at
different
least it
work.
allows for a scalability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I can I just wanted to show people really quick. I was going to do this earlier and I just forgot. But I'm just kind of showing the website here, and this has gone through a lot of iteration, and it looks fantastic. And what I love about this is you're still educating people as to how this works, because it would be easy to assume that, oh well, everybody gets this, right? I also see menswear on here too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's new.
We've done it for a while. It's a smaller part of the business, but I have to get my clothes somewhere, Pete.
That's true. Yeah, and you look good. I mean, what can
Thank
I
you.
say?
As do you.
Um, well, I try, but you know, so you made this distinction. So there's zero to first sale. It's a whole different period of time. Then you start making sales, and I think for a lot of companies, still bootstrapping, founders still doing everything.
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying to remember back. We struggled as an agency at the first few years. We didn't really understand our value and how to be strategic. We
Mhm.
were we were we were technicians that started a
Right.
company and then figured out, hey, there's more skills involved, and we knew that we needed to become more strategic. But it seemed like every step of the way, it's like you think you've conquered one learning curve and then there's another.
Yeah, for sure. I have a term that I will use, and maybe I stole it from somebody, but it's, you need to manage the business for the times that you're in and where you're at. So, take Wantable, a quick story. We worked very hard to kind of 12 years ago put together, the business and the plan and get the website up and the first products and sell our first widget. And believe it or not, Wantable started as a makeup company. We sold women's makeup. We applied the same model that we had today, which is you come and answer a beauty profile. We pick the makeup that works for you and send it to you. And we found a lot of success from that in the initial days. The business was growing, but ultimately we decided apparel was a better match for the business. So we switched, and we had already had over $1 million in revenue by that time, where we said, even though we found some success here, we think there's a bigger opportunity for us to not only cast a wider net, but drive faster growth and get into the apparel space. And that's what we did. So we didn't sunset one category until we got confirmation of the next. But when we did, we realized that there were two distinctly different customers here. And as a result, we really couldn't mix the messages. You can't do everything and you can't take care of everyone across the universe. So we said we're going to wind down what we started with, which was women's beauty and makeup, and focus on apparel. And that was probably 10 or almost 11 years ago when we're a 12-year-old company. So it took us the first year at least to really figure out what the model was and the category was and how we were going to resonate and stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, and we were much slower learners. It took us a few years, but it came about by talking to more established agencies and them teaching us and understanding that we needed to be more strategic and what did that mean, and then you get to a point where things are working really well. And I think when we worked together, I was probably still doing 90% of the account service. And so I was doing almost all of the sales. So we really weren't there yet in terms of being able to delegate and scale. But it was probably shortly after that that we really realized systems and processes started to become really important, because we honestly, we didn't have any. We were really reliant on the people in the various chairs. And I think when we lost our receptionist who was doing our bookkeeping, and we all gathered around her machine at the time, and we said, we have no idea what she did. And we realized we need an operating manual. So those are the kinds of things. And I think there are distinct stages. And I think when you first hit six figures, sometimes that's a wall for companies. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
how do you get past those kinds of walls? What are the things that you've done to push past, I would
Right,
just
for
call it
sure.
a barrier, a wall?
Well, for us, then again, we're very product focused. So as our business expands, you need more folks to handle product or buy product or answer customer calls. Those are kind of linear. They kind of just continue to grow with the business. So, you look for opportunities to drive efficiency there, but the real opportunity for efficiency is something you touched on, which is taking the institutional knowledge that's so important at the beginning. You have in your case, you had your receptionist that doubled as the bookkeeper. You're not the only person that has had that. I've had that in at least two of my companies, where the person at the front door is, not only answering the calls and the people that come in, but taking care of the books as well. And so when you lose someone or someone graduates to a different department, even with your own company, how do you kind of keep that institutional knowledge? And then my first inclination has always been what you said: create those systems, create the processes, create the job descriptions. And that's very important. But I've always found it a bit of a tightrope, because you want to be nimble. What makes startups so successful, and the reason they often dethrone the incumbents, is because the drive of the founder, but the willingness to just push forth, get it done, and make it happen, as opposed to adding layers and layers of bureaucracy. But again, when you go from zero to, say 10 million in revenue, that's fine. But you want to go from 10 million to say 100 million in revenue. Well, you cannot scale with the same foundation you had, and you need to start layering in the processes, the systems, narrowing people's roles a bit so you can increase their specialty. And this has a tendency to bring with it a layer of bureaucracy. So some bureaucracy is necessary to keep, at least in my companies, to kind of keep us on track, to shut out the chaos. But too much tips you to one side, and too little tips you back to the other side. So it's almost a tightrope, if you can imagine, for us to constantly say, okay, this is where we are, and this is what we need to implement, and why it's important to implement it now, and it wasn't necessary for us to implement it then.
Yeah, and I think I accidentally said six figures as a wall. I mean seven figures. It's almost like there's a point where you hit, and then one of my mantras when I'm talking to clients is, if and I find this a lot. It's the $10 million company still operating like a $1 million company, but they're
Sure.
also thinking like a $1 million company. And I'm like, you know what? You need to think, walk, talk, act like a $10 million company, because that's what's going to get you to 20. Um,
Right.
it really can get stuck And nowadays, stuck means out of business before too long. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just the way the markets, the globalization. I mean, back when we started working together, globalization wasn't really much of a thing yet. And so that introduced a massive competition and price
Right.
erosion on every level, not just
Hmm.
for our services and products and just everything. It created opportunities, I think, but it's become more volatile, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that that is some great advice for startups, and
Right.
if you're a startup out there, you'd be wise to listen to that. Um, you have always been a believer in marketing,
Absolutely.
and so I was curious about how you see the role of marketing. And one question I have is, some people think marketing is branding, and some people think it's making things pretty, and other people, like myself, think it's more about strategy and research. But has marketing research played a big role in growth for you?
It has throughout my career, understanding the customer and being able to meet them where they are is important. In today's world, where you have anybody can go to Meta, so much of my business is direct to consumer. So you would go to a Meta, Facebook or Instagram, or maybe say Google. Let's just use those two as kind of because they're the two largest. Well, because anybody, whether they're in their basement just starting out, has the same access to the same eyeballs that I have, it really comes down to who's your audience, what's your value proposition. Now more than ever, what's your creative? If you were to ask anyone at Meta, they would say the most important is the thumb stopping, the creative, capturing that attention when a customer's attention is split so many ways with the instant gratification of today's social media. So marketing to me is at its core understanding who your customer is and getting in front of them and spending the dollars through that and measuring the ROI. But what sits on the outside, depending on how large you get and how much you spend, you start to tap into the halo effect. So now people are seeing you and not buying, but they're seeing you so much, you're starting to build a brand. And so having a unique point of view, having something that is memorable, getting into that branding part. Again, phase one for us, it was not about branding. It was about delivering a great product, creating word of mouth, and capturing the sale. As we enter kind of that next chapter, that north of $100 million company, there's people are going to start to learn about your brand even if they don't buy from you. So it's important to plant the seeds so that when they are ready to buy, they understand you and they get it and they will find you. So that's my answer.
No, that's awesome, because and I think it's very common with the way that we see how things work. And to your credit, we have a lot of clients that want to skip a plan. They don't want to do a marketing plan. They don't want to do the research, right? You weren't like that. And so you followed the process and you reap the rewards. And over the years, we've found that almost 100%, well, honestly, 100%. I just can't use that because no one will believe it. So I'm like, oh, 97%. But honestly, if they follow the process, the strategic process, and we didn't invent it, by the way, just you can go to the American Marketing Association and see what the marketing planning process is. If you follow that, all of them have been successful. And it's because they're doing their homework. For example, what's going to stop the scroll? What's going to grab the cognitive attention of your
Mhm.
customer? Well, you have to get inside their heads. You have to understand what is the most important thing out of 8,000 things on their mind at any given second. What are the things that are going to grab that primitive brain and make them go, hey, this is something I should
Yeah.
pay attention to? Then you have a matter of seconds to pull them in farther. And the more you know about them, the better. And then the other piece that's really important is your competitors. How are they positioning themselves? How can you find a unique differentiating position that makes you unique enough so that so that there's some level of differentiation? It's
Yeah.
hard to be completely unique anymore. I mean, would you agree or
A
disagree?
hundred,
I mean,
you are spot on. It is very difficult to be unique. And if you are unique, you will find that you are not unique for very long because someone will come along and, copy you. Yeah, taking a moment reflecting back, my last company, Buy Seasons, which we were known for our retail brands like buycostumes.com, Evite, gifts.com, all those brands. You know, um, in the case of Buy Costumes, we were the absolute largest. We had a 30% market share. Almost 1 out of 3 costumes sold on the internet, in the world came from us. And so when you're kind of in the number one position, you're really just staying ahead of the group, right? Everyone's copying, they're copying your mistakes and they're copying your wins because they just want to emulate who you are. And you have to be mindful of the role that you play on influencing the market and trends when you're at that size. Now, as you pointed out, I'm somewhere between number 5 and number 2, but I'm most certainly not number 1. And so it's been interesting in my career to go from being number 1 and how you lead an organization like that to being something that's not number 1 and avoiding the pitfalls of trying to emulate the competition, right? The number 1, right? And so we just found that the most important thing is to say, hey, look, we're us. We've identified our customer. We have distinct value propositions that are different. And we've carved out a niche, so to speak, that perhaps our competitor is probably 8 to maybe 10 times our size, significantly larger than us. We found this niche over here in these customers that love us, and we provide a value proposition, to them.
Well, yeah, and there's a great book called The New Positioning by Al Reese and Jack Trout that talks about categories and what happens. And I think Stitch Fix was really kind of a pioneer in the category. And so they're going to be almost impossible to displace. So being number 2 is actually a fantastic position to be, right? Because the market is so big. Now, with Buy Seasons, and let's talk Buy Costumes because that's even more specific. You literally created a category, right? So you were able to stay at the top of that category and own that category. So, but that is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
And that was a time when I think it's a lot harder to create categories now. But Coca-Cola is an example they use in the book, and I would recommend everybody. I'll put a link in the comments to the book. It's a classic book. And I think it made huge. Did you ever read that book?
I didn't.
So you just instinctively know this stuff, but it's a short little book. But it made huge waves in the marketing industry. And we think about positioning a lot. And when we talk, and now when you say positioning, people think what you're talking about is what's your ranking on Google? What's your position,
Sure.
right? No, we're talking about what space do you own in the mind of the marketplace? What idea do you own, right? And the category leader usually has the most obvious position, but then you can create a position that is different from them in the same category, but unique to you. It's not easy. I mean, and it takes some research and some time and some effort, but if you don't have a position, that means that you're commoditized. You're going to be seen as like everybody else. And if everything is the same as everybody else, there's only one thing to evaluate you on: price. Right? Nobody wants to be there. So having a position is the difference between competing on price and competing on value. So anyway, I'm on a soapbox there, but
I agree.
I think you've done a phenomenal job of positioning, and even the name, by the way, positions you. Like, it's just such a vertically integrated brand, and I just like it.
Thank you. We like it.
You like it too? Well, good deal. Let me just let the folks know real quick. If you're seeing this, if you're listening to this out in podcast land, because we're on every major podcast platform everywhere, you're only getting about half of the story. So this is a video podcast. And so if you'd like to see our very attractive faces and our fine fashions, you'll want to go to b2bmarketingmindset.com. You see that on your screen right there. And you see the rest of the story. There's a lot more information. There's 100 and some odd more, 109 more episodes. And so there's just a ton of knowledge there for you. And also next week, our guest is Todd Taskett. I think I've misspelled his name on the script here, from Potomac Business Capital, and he helps and buys and sells agency. He's going to help you. He's going to share how to maximize Tasky. That's his name. Thank you, little person in my ear. To maximize the value of your firm, whether you have a pending or a future exit. And so you don't want to miss that. We're here every Thursday, 11 o'clock Central, everywhere basically. And of course, if you miss it live, don't miss it live, because this is where the fun is. You can always catch it on b2bmarketingmindset.com. So enough of that. Gotta pay the bills around here, which that doesn't. Nothing pays the bills. You know who pays the bills? Me. This is not a money-making venture, Joe. Someday I'll do an episode on why we do this, right? Because it has massive tangible benefits for our business, but that's for another day. So one of the things when we talked, it's been quite a while now, but I remember talking about agencies and external, and you said, we have an entire floor of an internal agency. And so I thought it would be interesting to get your take on sort of internal agency versus external agency. I don't know if you use both. I think you kind of do, but
we do.
But what are the kind of pros and cons of those two approaches?
Well, it's been an interesting evolution, and I will say, in the beginning, I did everything myself until I met you and so many years ago,
Wow.
and then we started Wantable 100% internal, and there were multiple reasons for that. Again, as you transition, or rather, as we transition from a smaller organization, to a larger organization, you have to dig a bit deeper for, the gold, so to speak. You need to get more sophisticated to find a larger and larger set of customers. And so what I found with agencies and in-house is it always comes down to one thing. You can hire a great agency or a bad agency, or a great employee or a bad employee, or bad meaning bad at their job or in the wrong position. And so it really comes down to people. It always comes down to people. But where an agency brings, assuming they have amazing people, and I have amazing people, what an agency has brought to us, and we work with a couple currently, I call it the view from the hill. So we're down in the trenches working on our business, and all we know is what we know, right? It's very much we're seeing our own data and what's working, what's not working, all trial and error. Well, the right agency partner, if they're large enough and diverse enough, works with other great companies, and they can take those learnings, without, sharing any inside information, and apply them to their opinions and their strategies that they bring to you or to me. And so we found that is the key and the number one reason to keep an agency around. I mean, if we approach and said, hey, we can cut out hundreds and thousands of dollars of costs just simply by bringing these jobs in-house, we could. But what we would miss is that view from the hill, right? That perspective of what's going on that we have no idea and are not privy to. And so when you apply that to their expertise and their different point of view, it's been very beneficial. So we firmly believe, and we have some agencies that we've worked with now for multiple years, and they are part of the family. I mean, the calls that we have with them are very collaborative. They're invested almost as if they were employees, and we're invested in them as if we worked for their agency. It's a great relationship. We found that both works. Agencies with smart people internally, they can work together in tandem and sometimes in different areas. And we very much use agencies for their expertise and could kind of keep ourselves current and fresh.
And people have told me different things about internal agencies. Not my area of expertise, but they've at once said it's more expensive, and then they've said it's less expensive. But you said something totally different. It isn't even about that. It's about value that's provided by combining the two. And I know we've had probably 800 different clients over 30 some odd years. And you're the best salesman for this idea, yet, because all of that diverse experience gets focused down onto each client. And of course, we don't give away information, but it's kind of like, hey, we've seen these problems before. But I think the other thing that the external people do really well is, because, like, I'm an example of this. I'm a truth teller, right? You're not my boss, all right? So I don't have a boss, or I have 50, I don't know. It's hard to say, but let's say one of those bosses fires me. I don't care, right? I'm not vested in getting a paycheck. I can tell the truth every single time. And that's where I think I've been told is my greatest value is my obnoxiousness. I don't know. It doesn't sound good. Uh,
Yeah.
but but my willingness to say, look, this is how it is, whether you want to hear it or not, and then here's how we're going to fix it, which is the piece I think missing from a lot of agencies.
Right.
And
And I can imagine, I've never been on the agency side, but I can imagine it's a delicate balance. Many entrepreneurs, myself included, think they know everything, right?
absolutely,
And they don't like, I certainly don't like to hear sometimes the truth when it contradicts my perception of, what my problem is. So in that context, just kind of speaking to myself and my experience, identifying and optimizing yourself for being willing to take in a perspective and apply it. If as the entrepreneur, if I always say my number one goal is to improve my experience for my customers, grow my business, and take care of my employees. And if I'm hearing things from an expert that don't check out, I need to dig a bit deeper rather than immediately just rejecting it. I've found, and maybe you found the opposite, which is you're bringing the advice and you're just kind of pounding your head against something because you've been there, you've seen it, it's a well-worn path that you've traveled before, but your client might not be taking that advice or not fully understanding. I can imagine how frustrating that might be. And I know this because I've been on that side of it, right? I mean, I was, at times where in retrospect, looking back, saying, okay, I paid them this money to do something, not you, and they gave me exactly what I asked for, and I never used it.
yeah,
So,
it is frustrating. We lost a pretty good sized client because, and I only found this out later by talking to their agency, because we're not really an agency anymore. We're more like a management consulting firm that's
sure.
focused on customer acquisition, and we do work with B2C companies, D2C companies, B2B companies, but we mostly just talk about B2B because you got to focus somewhere. But
Yeah.
but we've been through the whole spectrum, and but the agency, I talked to them about 6 months after this client like unceremoniously fired us. Uh, and I was baffled by it, really. And one of the things that we always do if we have a contradicting opinion is it's not just our opinion. We're bringing data to the table. We talked to your customers. They said X. This conflicts with what you believe. We agree with it, as we've seen this before. I think that's really important because otherwise you've just got a couple of opinions, right? But the agency told me, he said, man, the thing is, you told them the truth. That is not what they wanted to hear, right?
Right.
They've closed 3 locations now since firing us, right?
Yeah.
Which makes me very sad because it's a family business. They had great success in the past, and they've got 100 more competitors now just locally, and but they just can't see through it. And I was able to see it right away. And of course, then the research we did confirm that. But yeah, it's frustrating, but it's also kind of a bummer because we really are rooting for the clients more than anybody.
Yeah.
But I think, the internal agency, you got to still buy equipment. You've got salaries and benefits, taxes, facility costs. But if you're not really worried, if you're not doing it I think when companies do it because they think they're going to save money, you've got also recruiting. I just don't think you're going to save money. I think it's going to come about the same, or a lot of agencies, especially in this market, it's going to be less money.
Yeah.
But I do think there's an argument to be made that, and we make this argument, by the way, we want you to have an internal marketing team,
Mhm.
uh, without it, it's just really too difficult.
Mhm.
And so, but there's a lot of agencies that really just do tactics. So they
Mhm.
just want to build the website, they want to do your social, they want to do this, they want to do that. They're not thinking on a strategic level. So they're
Right.
probably threatened by the internal people. But that's just, in my opinion, because they're not in a business model that brings true value to the market.
Yeah.
And usually they're struggling. But I think the answer is not really versus, is it? It's
For us,
together.
anyways.
It's
Yeah.
togetherness.
It is togetherness, Pete. Yeah, to just riff on what you said before you move on. I mean, a great agency for us is an agency that allows us to kind of take a sigh of relief on things, act as a fallback, sometimes confirm what we're doing is right, sometimes giving us a new perspective, and just a great partner, right? Again, don't ever ask me to say this in front of my agency, but it's not about what we pay them. Of course, I'm going to negotiate the best possible price. It's about the value that we get, and we decided a while ago, we don't want to overpay, but we most certainly don't want to underpay.
You know, that's a very mature business person perspective, right? Because you've learned, I'm sure you've tried all of these different things and what's worked and what hasn't. By the way, your agency probably will watch this, so um, we'll edit. No, it's live. There's no editing.
No editing.
But no, I think that's what agencies want. By the way, nobody wants to overcharge, and if they undercharge, then they can't deliver the value because it's we're in business to make money also. And I mean,
Yeah.
we have an account now that we're losing our shirts on, right? And so we're still not going to cut corners for them. It's just not our culture, but
Mhm.
it's painful, right? We'd rather have the margin to be able to do more, right?
Yeah.
And so that's some good advice there. The agencies that are listening out there, you're getting some really good advice. So,
Yeah.
um,
Something I will say to agencies, I know you're going to move on, is
sure.
any partner that I work with, whether it's an agency or someone else, I always say, look, we want you to make money. Because truthfully, if they're not making money, then they're going to starve the resources and I'm not going to get 100%. So I always like to say, we want you to make money. We just don't want you to make too much money. And that's kind of our way of saying, look, we're not here to lowball you, but we're also smart enough to not overpay. And we've seen it on both ends. We've seen agencies come in and we're looking at going, that seems a little too light. And then other agencies where we say, well, look, I mean, they're just not giving us the value here. And neither one is sustainable. We love long-term relationships, right? If you're underpaying an agency or any partner for that matter, they can't survive and they're not going to be able to give you their best product. And if you have an agency that you're overpaying, you're not setting the tone that, you're here to run a profitable business and you understand your business and you inspect what you expect. So it's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I I think not to beat the drum too hard here, but I think the right amount of money is what works for your business, and it's up to the agency to be profitable or not take the business, right? There's
Right.
too much of this, let's just tell the client what they want to hear and take the money, and then we'll figure it out later. Okay, that's
Right.
it's just not sustainable. And if you're watching out for your client's best interest, you're not going to do that. Um, but I think also being transparent with what your budget is and knowing your cost of acquisition and being and if you're talking cost of acquisition and your agency's looking at you like a deer in the headlights, maybe move along. But they should understand the numbers, and a good agency is going to want to make it work for you because guess what? That increases your lifetime value to them. So it's really a win-win when you get these things right. I think when there's this sort of almost conflict negotiation trying to
Mhm.
get the better deal, I mean, that's when I think things kind of go south. But to be honest, that's more the status quo. I think you're kind of the exception
Sure.
there. So but people would be wise to listen up. Surprise lessons. I wanted to make sure I included this because have there been any big surprises along the way?
Well, I mean, I've learned a lot, and there's been a
Where
lot
to
of
start?
surprises. Are we talking about today or this week or the last decade? But all jokes aside, I wouldn't call it's no longer a surprise, but at one point it was a surprise, which is there is not a direct correlation between, make no mistake, you must work super hard, but working harder is not necessarily the solution to growth once you're giving it 100%. It's about, I hate to use the term, working smarter, finding efficiencies and understanding that you can actually have both. I'm not talking about work-life balance. I'm a founder of 3 companies. There's zero work-life balance. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you can have both in the sense that you can work like hell and have an incredible company. And if you want it to get bigger and better and more successful, doesn't always equate to going more. And so to me, it's been about working hard, working smarter, not harder. But I don't want that to be the excuse for not giving it 100%. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, because got up because I'm in my 50s now, and sometimes you do that at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so I answered a few emails. I am mindful to my team to set those emails to not deliver until they're in the office or at their desk. But, always give 100%, but understand that you can grow your business and find more success by driving efficiency and creating kind of that vibe.
What is this work-life balance you speak of? I'm not familiar
Well,
with the term. Um, you know, it's funny because when I wrote that question, I thought the same thing. Where would you begin with the surprise lessons? It's like I'm surprised every single day.
yeah,
And maybe that's what keeps my interest. I don't know.
yeah,
I think that I think one of the biggest surprises for me has been it's along the same lines, like how much more can be accomplished if you're well rested,
hmm,
if you're not pushing everything to the limits all the time, and then the biggest thing is just saying no. No,
yeah,
no, no, no.
yeah,
I'm like the king of no. Someone called me that. I love it. I'm like, I'll take
yeah,
it. But it's nothing personal. It's just trying to focus on taking on work, for example, that's the best match for us at possible, and
for
not
sure.
taking on the things that aren't. And it's become a selfish pursuit because if it's not a match, it drains me of energy,
Right,
right? And I'm
right,
61, and
yeah,
so my energy is a shrinking commodity.
yeah.
But
But that is a great point. I want to substitute my answer for your answer, so maybe in post they can give me credit for your answer. But you're absolutely right. A good founder, if we kind of tie back to, startups, you need to sometimes just be the person that says no, no to
yeah.
things, right? You're 100% spot on. So yeah, thanks for the reminder
Well,
there.
and
That's
it's hard for me because I want to help everybody. I mean, I really do, and so
right,
it's been something. And sometimes I'll backslide, right?
right.
But we'll have the editor put my voice into your
Oh,
mouth, and
perfect.
people will
Thank
be
you.
completely confused. They'll be like,
Excellent.
"Oh,
Great.
he's a really good impersonator on top of it." Um, but let's wrap one more thing, and we'll go to our final thoughts. But what advice would you give to agencies that might be listening to the program? Because Agency Founders Network, we've got a lot of agencies that are
Mhm.
trying to grow, and they would love to win an account like yours.
Yeah.
But what can you tell them that would be a piece of advice that
Yeah,
they
I'm
need
just
to
going to
take to heart?
steal from what I see our two best agencies doing, right? So, um, taking care of the customer, um, you know, and again, taking care of the customer can be kind of a blanket statement for so much, but I'll use an example. We have this agency locally that has courted us for years. They came in and we finally started working with them in the last year. And recently we just had this small issue, called them for their expert advice, and they actually said, we don't have the expert opinion on this one, but we're friendly with one of our competitors, and we're going to get one of their people to kind of come over and just kind of answer this question for you, right? I'm sure that was a favor that they're going to have to pay later or whatever, but like they solved the solution for us. And that was just incredible. So that's an extreme example, but I wanted to use it to illustrate just the value that they bring to us. And there's times that they mess things up, right? This is not about being 100% accurate. It's really about building the trust so that when you go to them, they've got your back. And then when they say something you don't want to hear, you can trust what they're saying. And so building that trust, developing that relationship over time and taking care of us is what keeps the two agencies now that we have around, and they'll probably be around. Nothing is forever, but if it was, I would want them to be here with us forever.
Wow, that's fantastic. And let me ask you some advice. I
Sure.
have a client now that's very confrontational, very disrespectful, really. And I found that I wasn't as polite to them on a call as I should have been. In fact, I couldn't get a sentence out with these people.
Yeah.
And I'm, as much as I want to say, well, the customer's always right, I think at some point we all have our limits, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, is the
Well,
customer always right?
Well, if the customer is always right, then why do they need an agency? I'm not trying to kind of play to the question there, but I'll use myself as an example. I'm in my 50s now. I started my first company in my early 20s. I'm not the same person. But what has driven me is the confidence. And I think what drives a lot of founders of companies is their confidence. And that often spills over into, you know, just saying it's, if I say it loud enough and I say it enough, I'm going to convince everyone around me and myself. And so, it is tough to deal with someone like me 20 years ago, or maybe just 5 minutes ago. Like when you're so convinced that you're right and you're dominating the conversation, anyone that challenges your point of view is wrong. And again, the perspective that you have as from an entrepreneur standpoint is there's a positive reinforcement to a certain extent because that entrepreneur has made the decisions when everyone has said, that's not going to work, never going to happen, you're not going to make it. And here they are large enough to be able to pay for your services. So they get this reinforcement that, hey, when people say no to me, that just drives me to go harder. And so the challenge is to, even if you start off saying, okay, they're just wrong and I'm always right, you have to take a beat and say, okay, are they wrong? And you just kind of look from the other person's point of view. And that is a tough thing to do. I would honestly say that's more on your customer than it is on you, because, you can try and negotiate that and kind of change the way you pitch it and be nicer or be tougher. But ultimately, some clients, some people, again, speaking from my having been there, just think they know everything, and that has served them well, but it won't serve them forever in every situation, and they might just have to figure it out themselves. They might have to be that client that you went to and you told them to do something and they said no and they broke up with you, and now they're closing stores or doing whatever that they're doing. That's tough.
And I think that one, I don't have a good poker face, and the older I get, the less my tolerance for fools becomes. But this was, it was a situation, I think, where we were doing a lot of extra work for them, and they just would not acknowledge it. They want to get more, and they want to get more, and they want to get more, and then the communication style. But I mean, I take full responsibility. I should not have been so rude to them, but I don't really care. But I was just curious about that, and I think that it comes back to the broader point. It's got to be a win-win relationship where the client's looking out for the agency's looking out for the client. The result there is you've got two businesses that are doing well, doing great things together. I believe that is the type of relationship that we have and that we had back in the past, and we both did well, and we were able to give you everything that we had, and we didn't sweat the pennies. We just did what needed to be done because we just enjoyed it, and you gave us the freedom to do our best work. And so that's, I think, the biggest lesson of all. So I want to go to our final thoughts now. And so as we wrap up today's episode, and by the way, thank you for this. This has been
pleasure.
I think one of the better episodes out of 100.
But you're nice to say that.
Let's. Well, I'm serious. I love this topic. I could keep going, but it's the internet. So let's start with maybe your final thoughts about all of these things we've talked about, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I'm listening to myself speak and I'm hearing you kind of opine on the various topics, it's a reminder of the value that we have or that is out there in strong partnerships. I'm a relatively introverted person, so getting kind of out there and developing these relationships, it frankly, it's just a reminder of the agencies that I already work with and the value that they bring. And the strength in partnerships. And I guess I would say, as we were kind of talking about the various topics and dealing with both sides of the equation, I guess from my point, if I look back at the agencies that we have, it's kind of like a relationship, right? It's always going to be amazing in the beginning. Or let me rephrase, it's typically the best it's going to be in the beginning, right? You're in the kind of the courtship stage. Any cracks you see that we have seen at that point should most likely be addressed right away. So in my case, well, let me change it. In the example we were just talking about, where you might have a client that is a bit confrontational, pulling them aside and addressing that even before you start, like, to me, is just, we have never made money with short-term relationships. We've only made money when we found the customers or the partners that are going to stay with us a long time. And so getting, letting them move on if they're not the right one is great, and also allowing you to have the free time to go find that client that's going to be with you forever and is going to be a strong partner, is going to give you a rewarding day. I don't know. If you have that opportunity, I think that strikes me on both sides to do that.
Yeah, excellent. My final thoughts are that, one, it's incredibly difficult in this market and day and age to be a startup and to take it to a level of success that matters, right? And it takes luck. There's luck parts of it are luck. The biggest thing, I think, is that your mind is always open. You're always questioning. You're always trying to be better, and you're not accepting the status quo. And then partnering with companies, realizing that maybe you don't have all the answers, and there are people out there that if you don't have the expertise, you could bring it in nowadays. You could bring in any kind of expertise. And it's this combination of things, I think, is what fuels you into the big time. And I've never been there, but I've had a lot of clients that were major global billion-dollar companies, and it's been really interesting to kind of study their history. And it's a lot of these same lessons, honestly. So I think they're kind of universal, but what a great discussion. Thank you so much. Again, we'll hopefully talk again soon if you want to just hang on while we wrap this up. But thanks for anybody out there listening, including my mom. And I hope we've been able to bring you some value. So we're here every Thursday, 11 o'clock Central, on every platform that you can think of. So this is B2B Mindset signing off. Thank you.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.